Welcome to SoulPod, where science meets mysticism and your inner wisdom leads the way. I'm your guide, Crystal Cassidy, and together we will bridge the seen and the unseen, science and spirituality, the practical and the profound. From quantum physics to energy centers, near-death experiences to extraterrestrial contact, join us as we delve into the mysteries of consciousness and journey together towards a more awakened, compassionate, and soul-connected world. Find your seat, drop in, and let's go on a journey together.
Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of SoulPodcast. Linda here, and we are joined by Cat Mansfield, the brilliant woman that you've come to know and love and seen all throughout this podcast.
Thank you. I'm stoked to be here.
What we're getting into today, free will versus fate. And this is an idea that came through Kat and through some experiences that happened over the weekend. But the entire thing that we want to unpack is how to navigate to your highest timeline, and especially what science has to say about different timelines, as well as what role free will has in these different timelines. And science gets into this through things like the invisible string theory, the many worlds interpretation that says that there are, on a quantum level, there are all of these different timelines unfolding at the same time. And maybe the one that we're living is the one that we know, but it's entirely possible that there are plenty of others out there. But what we're kind of thinking about today is choice as a portal for different timelines. So I'd love to start with that, Kat. What are your thoughts on what you've seen as far as science goes, as well as what role you think choice plays in determining the timeline that we're on? So talk a bit about that.
Yeah, kind of like we touched on in last week's episode. I feel like one of the concepts that really acts as a foundation for this is superposition, which essentially says that a particle can exist in infinite states in the quantum. And then our observation creates the collapse of that wave into a reality. It means that there are infinite number of timelines. There are an infinite number of realities that exist in any given moment, in the present moment. And now we have access to infinite timelines, infinite versions of self as well. And so that, like playing with that and marinating in that, gives us so much power to co-create with the universe. And yeah, when I first kind of started playing with this a lot this weekend, this idea of fate versus free will, I was sitting with my partner and we were talking about whether or not something's meant to be, like whether or not whatever is quote unquote meant to be is going to happen no matter what. And then that opened up the discussion of, okay, well, what if I decide to do something different? What if I decide to change my course using my free will, because I am a sovereign being in this human body and I have the choice. I always have choice. Every moment is an intersection point of choice, whether I have a coffee or a tea, whether I leave at 9:30 or leave at 9:15. These are all like micro moments that have a domino effect on the succession of the timeline that comes next. And so playing with that and playing with the idea of there is a highest timeline that gets me to, I guess, my fate, what is meant to be. And then we can, kind of play with what is fate? What does that mean?
I was just about to ask. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, is fate a destination? Is fate a number of lessons that we're meant to learn? Is fate a role we're meant to step into? Like fate doesn't have to necessarily be this one pinpointed destination on the map. And like, how do we play with arriving and stepping into that fate while also kind of welcoming the least resistance with our free choice or with our free will, And so yeah, it's just like a fun thought experiment and a fun, it's a fun thing to explore.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. Like, I think of the butterfly effect, right? Which we've always known as if you kill a butterfly here, you're causing rain in Montreal, something like that, where it's like you have no idea the implications of these choices that you're making. And so my question to you is, what role do you think those decisions make for someone who maybe is feeling like, oh my God, if every choice I make has consequences? What does that mean about me as a person? What if I do the wrong, quote unquote, wrong thing? I feel like the wrong thing can come up a lot, especially for those who are newer on their spiritual journey. What do you think is the best reframe so that we are simultaneously walking the line of personal accountability while also recognizing that there are going to be things that maybe were always meant to happen, for better or for worse?
This is perfect. It's perfect to ask the question of what if I make the wrong choice? And I think a lot of us can get wrapped up in that fear in this spiritual journey of like, especially when you are a meditator, you've been, practicing mindfulness, and you hold yourself to this standard of always aligning with your highest self and perhaps not holding space for the fact that you're human, for the reality in which your humanness kind of muddles that clarity. And so the way I see it is there's no such thing as a wrong choice. And even like another fun thought experiment is playing with like, if you made a quote unquote wrong decision, it's a part of the ultimate fate. So kind of two, I guess, branches of thinking there, in that there's no such thing as a wrong choice. So let's say another visual I like to use here in thinking about this is, let's say fate is, for the sake of this conversation, a destination we input into Apple Maps. And then Apple Maps populates 4 different versions of how to get there. One's 11 minutes, one's 17 minutes, and you press the 11-minute destination. That kind of how I see it is like our highest timeline. It's like the path of least resistance when we're in most flow, kind of getting to where we need to go in the most efficient way. But if you're on that 11-minute path and then, you hit a red light, so you're like, whatever, I'm just going to take a right here. I'm just going to go a different direction. Apple Maps is going to recalibrate and give you another route to get there. Every time you take a different turn, there's like the spinning wheel, and it recalibrates and it gives you another route to get to the same destination. It's a lot of how I see, this one timeline or this one thought process of wrong decision, like there's no such thing. That wrong decision was a part of the overall path, like was actually calculated into the initial route to get there, right?
Yeah.
And that might be because your soul needed that, opening, whatever it was, like that rupture. Maybe it was deciding to entertain a suitor that wasn't aligned, or a job opportunity that wasn't aligned. Like you needed that awakening, that lesson to get you to where you needed to go, to get to the next thing, to get to the next thing, right? So there's 2 thought processes underneath the same umbrella, that there's no such thing as a wrong choice, as a misdirection, really. And playing with that idea that the misdirection might be deeply embedded into the ultimate direction.
Yeah. I almost feel like, I have this saying I like to say, which is there's no such thing as right or wrong. There's only forward motion. And I think this was like an energetic I anchored to, especially when I was first going through a spiritual awakening and feeling like every decision I made was going to have consequences and I was going to learn a hard lesson. I feel like a really important reframe when it comes to free will versus fate is recognizing that, like you said, even those things that are painful, even those quote unquote bad things that happen, are always going to end up serving you, so long as you can find the blessing and the lesson that's in them and the opportunity to grow. Exploring this further, I feel like a big part of the question is, are you making a decision from a place of power or from a place of survival? And when you're making that decision from a place of power, you're always inevitably going to be moving towards your higher timeline. And now the question is, how do we recognize when we're making a choice from a place of power versus survival?
Yeah, and I think, I'd love to hear your perspective on this too, because I do think those signs and that feedback is going to be so nuanced and individual, for each of us and the way that we interact with the universe and the way we co-create. But some things that I notice are like, resistance. If I'm coming up to the same feeling of resistance or apathy or struggle, frustration is a big one as well. When I that's how a key sign in my body, like when alarms are going off, is if I find myself feeling frustrated. And on the other side of that coin, when you feel like you're more in flow, when you notice more synchronicities, when things start to come to you, right? It's like, because like we mentioned, that highest timeline, it exists already, and it's not about reaching for it or making it happen. It's about aligning with it and observing it in a way that which we can get into a little bit more too, in a way that you truly believe it exists for you. Because just like hearing us talk about it and hearing us talk about how your highest timeline exists, that's not good enough unless you are doing the supplemental practices to really prime your nervous system and raise your frequency to truly match that timeline. And so I think another reason this conversation like bubbled up this weekend is because I've been so steeped in my practices recently. Like my meditation practice has just popped off. I think especially since joining SoulPod and having these conversations and learning more about the quantum, like the true foundations of the quantum and the power that we hold as spirits in this human body. I've just been so motivated to like really sit down and tap into that and raise my consciousness. And so I think the more devoted you are to those practices and to that, and what those practices do is essentially clear that channel, right? The more devoted you are to clearing that channel and becoming a vehicle and conduit for like the pulse of the universe to move through you and be what moves you, like be what kind of guides you in that decision making, in each of those micro decisions that creates the ultimate timeline. The more connected you are to that and the more clear you are, the more in tune you are with that pulse, the more you're moving with less resistance, the more you're moving with that ultimate harmony of that kind of universal pulse.
Have you ever read The Surrender Experiment by, I think it's Michael Singer who wrote it?
No.
It's basically, it's exactly that. It's this person goes into the woods and it's a true story, and he starts meditating, and every time he sits down to meditate, he surrenders his ego, for lack of a better word, deeper and deeper and deeper, and his life unfolds in more and more and more extraordinary ways as time goes on and as his practice deepens. And you hear about this all the time, like in social media, people call it like quantum leaping, timeline jumping. That's essentially what people are talking about, right? As long as they're talking about the right thing, not just trying to sell you something. What they're talking about is like that concept that the more you regulate your nervous system, the more grounded you become within yourself, and not yourself as in the person that you think you are, but truly just surrendering to life's flow, the more things seem to unfold for you. And it is kind of like counterintuitive in a weird way, right? Because I feel like we think, okay, I want to move into my highest timeline. Let me go ahead and like pedal to the metal, do everything I possibly can to like make this happen for myself. And really what we're saying, and what we're always talking about when we're saying return to your practice, is the proven fact that deepened surrender is where all of life's flow is going to come from. I also, when we think about quantum entanglement, quantum leaping, timeline jumping, all of these things, just like how all of these different realities exist at different moments, and something like maybe a near-death experience can kind of branch those things into two different timelines, there's also so many more possibilities than we can possibly be aware of, right? So there is perhaps no singular highest timeline. Maybe there are highest timelines. And the reason why all of these things happening are going to, you know, when you deepen your practice through the things that happen to you, are going to get you there is because of all of the infinite possibilities that exist.
I think resting in that, knowing that there are infinite permutations of your highest timeline. It doesn't look like one specific, again, destination or one specific house or one specific even partner. It's like there are infinite permutations of you embodying that highest timeline, of you embodying that highest self. Because like highest self and highest timeline are one and the same, you know,
one and the
like
same
chicken and the egg. Like you have to be embodied in your highest self to step into your highest timeline. And so there's not one. And I think that circles back to our previous point of like sitting in that place of fear in making those decisions and at those micro moments of like, do I take the job or do I not? Or like, do I go on a second date with him or do I not? Or,
and what if I make the wrong decision?
Yeah, exactly. Then what's going to happen? I'm going to miss what's actually meant for me. And I think really sitting in that, like you cannot miss what's meant for you. You cannot miss. Like, and letting that foundational kind of, I guess, definition of fate being like, what is meant for you is meant for you. Like you have
meant for you. Yeah. You simply can't outrun it. You can't.
Right. You can't miss it. Like you can't, no matter what you do, it is doing everything it can to meet you.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
If you're, especially on this path, you know, which if you're listening to this podcast, you are, if you're, if you're devoted to a deeper self-inquiry, to these practices, then you are destined to meet that fate. Again, it's doing everything it can to meet you. And so being in that space of willingness, of possibility versus contraction and fear around all of those decisions is what's going to excel that timeline meeting you, or you aligning with that timeline.
Yes. I love that you mentioned the contraction versus the feeling of expansiveness. It's kind of, when you think about it, it's kind of a form of abundance mindset. You know what I mean? It's like, you don't just have to, it's not about just like believe that there's like an abundant universe out there for you. Yes, but also believe that you are abundant with different opportunities to move into the places that you want to be. And it's worth examining too, like our relationship with desire. You know what I mean? Is that thing that you, maybe for anyone who's in like a desperation place, let's say, is that thing that you want something that you want to connect with because it will prove that you are worth that higher timeline? Or is it something that is truly aligned with your soul? Because the things that are truly aligned with your soul, like they are inevitable, right? You know, and
into the path. Totally.
Yeah, they're totally in the path. I think about like my partner and I, we connected 5 times over the course of 5 years. From the first time we met to when we finally got together, you know, we met in 5 different locations, lived so many lives in between that first meeting and when we finally connected. And it wasn't until we both were on that path of self-actualization that the universe finally went like, okay, now is your time. And in those 5 years, I mean, I was desperate for true love. I was like desperate to find that person that I was going to spend my life with, like desperate for it. And it wasn't until I finally was in that place, and same with her. It wasn't until, you know, I was finally in that place of knowing that I'm totally fine alone as well, and like truly, truly loving myself, that finally the thing that was, looking back, inevitable all along happened and came through. You know, so talk a bit about that. What about the inevitability of your, I'm almost reluctant to call it desires, but your highest timeline, let's say. Tell us a bit about your thoughts on how someone can, I guess, ground into trust and just the inevitability of that highest timeline.
Well, I also want to underscore our highest timeline is not in isolation, right? And I think your story and so many other stories of how people have collided with their person and or collided with any like job opportunity or anything. It's like, it's not, your timeline is not in isolation of others, right? It like is the whole, foundation of everything we speak about plays on the interconnectedness of all beings, of all, time and space harmonizing in this moment that is now. And so your highest timeline had to harmonize with your partner's highest timeline for you guys to collide at the time that you did, the fifth time that you met. It's like
Yeah.
your frequency and her frequency had to be in a space where it was coherent to be
Yeah,
together.
and fully surrendered. Like we both had to be not looking for it in order for it to
Right.
happen in a funny way,
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
so anyone who's listening or calling in a partner or calling in really anything, I think sitting in that trust that you're really only responsible for your side of the street, and knowing that there's a whole other web, there's a whole tapestry, a whole web that's, like you said, kind of that butterfly effect, also working to meet you, also conspiring to get itself to where it needs to be for the timelines to meet, and for the timelines to be what's the word, like mend together. To your other question, something that was coming through for me, this is something I talk about a lot. So there's this study done that basically connected. They had people come in and be like test subjects. They connected their brains to
An
monitors,
EEG
their heart to monitors. And what they did is they showed them two sets of pictures. One set of pictures was extremely activating. One set of pictures was super calming and peaceful. So, like car crashes in one set, and then bunnies, for example. And what they found is that people's heart responded to the activating pictures before they were showed it. Before they saw it. So like what that tells us is that our hearts, like our heart is connected to a greater pulse, again, that universal pulse.
Yeah.
It's like the first thing that is connected to the universe. It's our like initial antenna, and it knows before the rest of us knows, before our body knows, before our mind knows, before our eyes even see what's coming or see what is there. Our heart is tuned into that.
Oh my gosh.
And so I think that like I always come back to that, because as it pertains to this conversation, it's like the more in tune we are with ourselves, like we were saying, but the more in tune we are with our heart, with that channel, like there's a knowing of what you need, a knowing of where you're meant to go, that comes through in that, whether it be from your heart space, if you want to call it that, or your intuition, or kind of just like that knowing without having that reason to know, because it hasn't even registered in our conscious analytical mind yet. There's that knowing that's connected to that universal pulse. And so the more we're in tune with that, the more we're guided to those places, the more we're meeting what is meant for us, like inevitably is meant for us, the more we know, like, no, I actually just know that I need to be there. I don't know why, but I know that I need to go to dinner here. I know that I need to get a coffee here. I know that I need to spend this day in the woods, and like take that for myself. It's just something I know. And I think getting to that place where you unapologetically trust that knowing and trust that guidance is what will, lead you and guide you to where you're meant to go next, and guide you to on this route of meeting your fate. Something special happens when we step away from the noise of everyday life and into a space of amplified presence and deep devotion to our spiritual growth. A space where we're seen, supported, and reminded of the light within us. That is exactly what you'll have the chance to do on our SoulPod retreat. We are so excited to invite you on this 4-day immersion in Joshua Tree, California, August 28th through 31st. Specifically designed to illuminate your path and harness the light within. From guided meditations under the stars to transformative breathwork journeys, this is more than a retreat. It's a portal into the next level of you. You'll be held in a sacred container with like-minded souls, moving from the earthly into the mystical, expanding your intuition, deepening into your purpose, and activating your true energetic potential. If you're ready to dive into the mystical with us, join Crystal, myself, and the amazing SoulPod team in the desert, under the stars, in the stillness, and beyond the veil. Head to www.soulpodapp.com/retreat to learn more and book your alignment call. Spaces are limited to just 12 light beings for this journey. So if you feel the call, listen.
Yeah, and it does always come from like the heart space, right? Like that center space. I think about like we had my birthday weekend last weekend, and I had this whole lineup planned for Friday. I like took the day off. I had this whole plan in motion where I was going to go to this town called New Paltz, which I had been to before, and I was like, that's the plan, that's the plan. Reservations made, everything's booked. We wake up Friday after driving all the way out to the woods. We wake up Friday and I'm like, I need to go to Woodstock. I'm like, I don't know anything about Woodstock, but I can just hear that I'm like meant to go to Woodstock. And I've been kind of actively calling in this like storybook life of living in like a little small town that's like queer friendly and cute and artists and escape, you know. Yeah, so I woke up on Friday and my heart was just like Woodstock, 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 Woodstock. And we get there and the first thing I see is this Victorian mansion with an herbalism shop on the inside. And I'm like, yep, this is home. I'm nowhere near connecting with that ultimate desire, but there is a sort of satisfaction in recognizing when you see your future timeline externally, even if you're not in that place of being there yet. Sometimes, you know, you can recognize that highest timeline, even though you know you are not physically prepared or emotionally prepared or spiritually prepared to meet with it yet. Do you have any like experiences like that you can think of like moments you recognized your highest timeline but weren't fully there yet, you know?
Yeah, well, a few things come to mind. Two different stories come to mind in terms of like recognizing my highest timeline, even in some previous episodes. I think our conscious manifestation episode, we were talking about how I'm calling in, my partner and I are calling in our new space and we're manifesting our new home.
Yeah.
And we saw this home and it was beautiful. The backyard was everything I envisioned. It was like, I walked in and I was like, wow, this is the first home where I'm like, I could really see us here.
Yeah.
And it was about like $500 to $600 above our budget. Even that, like without that $500 to $600 was still a push, but like with that extra, we're like, oh, it's just like irresponsible. We just we could send it and do the whole like in a way kind of spiritual bypassing. Like,
no, why put yourself under that?
Yeah, but we're like, let's not. So we decided not to. I was meditating that day by the river, and kind of exactly what you're saying, where I had this download of like, we're not expanded enough for this. Like we're not big enough. And when I say
like close enough to alignment.
Yeah. Like we haven't moved through the edges that we need to move through, like to be the people who are living in this space. And with that, there's no like shame or actually immediately I felt this urge to kind of like, well, I wish I could speed up that expansion. You know, like I wish I could just step through all this fear like right now. And that's just not how it works. There's like a divine timing to that. And it gave me the motivation to really like tune in to where I'm shying away from those edges, to where I'm shying away from stepping through that fear, and kind of gave me that extra like belief in myself of like, okay, I know we're meant to be expanded. Like that's the whole journey. That's our whole journey here, to keep expanding, to keep meeting those edges, to keep like enforcing that knowing and our capability and our infinite potential as spirits in this human body. That's the journey, you know? So I know we're on that path and we're not there yet. And that's okay. Simultaneously, like seeing the timeline where we are in that house, not that house specifically, but that house that evokes that feeling in me, that house that has the huge windows next to the bathtub and the kitchen with white countertops and I'm so excited to cook in, you know, like the feeling of that house together and where we're going to start a family and have a dog and can already see it and feel it. And like, we'll sit in meditation and honestly be brought to like an emotional, like gratitude for the fact that I know that that's that timeline that I'm meant to connect with. Like I feel it, I see it, even though I'm not expanded enough for it now. And what else is coming up for me is that there's a little bit of what I've noticed in my practice, a little bit of fear around truly seeing that highest timeline and wondering if you're like capable of that kind of expansion and B, worthy of that kind of expansion. Like those are the two things when I sit in meditation and see that highest timeline and like marinating in that gratitude, literally brought to tears by the gratitude of like, wow, that's what's waiting for me. Like, am I worthy enough for that? Like how am I so lucky and so, worth that being where I'm going? And I think again, that's the practice. That's the moment where we get to alchemize that into truth, into the truth of our worthiness, of our infinite potential to expand into our highest self that's meant to align with that highest timeline, and so those are kind of two things that come through for me in terms of navigating, like playing with that highest timeline, even though you might not be there yet, and that's okay.
And that's perfectly okay. And I love that you bring up gratitude as a portal. I really do think that science is going to prove to us that those glimmers, those little moments of an existence you haven't lived yet, but you feel utterly connected to, I think that we're going to realize that that is evidence of other timelines, right? It's like we do have this connection to, time is happening instantaneously. Time isn't happening in a linear fashion. And so it's fascinating to me when we tune into those moments that are beyond just ordinary imagination, that are like fully overriding our senses, where you can feel that you're in that moment, It's fascinating to me that those really do feel like clues to what is to come, And I think that can also be very comforting to people to recognize that when those kind of desires hit you, when you're so overcome with that desire that you tune into gratitude, that is not just a clue as to what your North Star is and what your thing you're moving toward is. It's also the portal and the opportunity to see like, okay, this is my desire. Like, rather than invalidate it or wonder if it's possible for me, I'm going to see this intrinsic desire that no one planted in me as something that is a sign it's inevitable, that's a clue that it's inevitable. And I'm going to return to my practice knowing that simply having that desire means it is meant for me. I have it with like smell specifically. We went upstate and I connected with Woodstock, really fell in love, saw myself there. And then ever since, I have these moments where the apartment that we're in right now feels kind of small for a moment. It'll feel like smaller, and then I'll smell jasmine, like night blooming jasmine out of nowhere. Wow. And I do feel like it's like it's those timelines starting to collapse, where this future that I know I've always wanted ever since I was a kid, that it's moving towards me. And mind you, like, I'm from Miami, I'm from the tropics. Like I've never lived in upstate New York. I know nothing about upstate New York, but I just know that ever since I was a little kid, I've been calling in rich, fertile soil, big trees and seasons. And that's been like something that's always just felt right to me. And I do feel like the books I loved as a kid and even that I love now always played into that, not because of those books themselves, but because that desire was planted in me so long ago,
Yeah. And I think those desires are, like you're saying, like little imprints in our soul's blueprint of what our fate is, of like of where we're being called to build, specifically like where on this planet you're meant to build, with who you're meant to build with. Like there are all these little imprints, and I feel like they're all coming through from like different facets of past lives, like past iterations of your soul that are trying to come through and be heard and seen and play through this life as well. Yeah. And so, like you're saying, really listening to those desires and And something else that's coming up for me is like a practice in playing with this is loosening your grasp on, again, this on free will, like loosening your grasp on all of these little choices and being able to move more into that space of trust and guidance. And I saw on your socials this weekend, Saturday, you and your partner just had like an adventure day where you just like are guided by the universe, and you
it was so
you just
fun.
led to one place and the next. And I love that. That was similar to what my partner and I were doing on Saturday. I saw it. And
I
was like,
know, which
"Same."
is so funny.
It's so funny. It must have been just like a craving that we both needed, and that happens to my partner and I often, or we find ourselves in the situation where we had this one plan, like we were going to go on this one specific hike, and then we get there and the like roadblock is there. They're like, this trail's closed, and in that
or it just doesn't feel right.
or
anymore.
like, it's not it. But in that moment, you have the option to kind of like marinate in that resistance, to feel like things aren't working, things, the universe is, you're not in flow, kind of succumb to that belief, or be like, interesting, this is an opportunity for me to be ping-ponged towards greater alignment. Like the universe is sending me somewhere else. Let's explore and see, like kind of just allow yourself to be ping-ponged somewhere else, or pinball, whatever visual you want to use, somewhere else, and see what's waiting for you there. And that's happened to us so many times. Like this one time we were in Puerto Rico, and same thing. We had this one specific hike where we drove for an hour to get there. We're like pulling up to where the trailhead's meant to be, and there are these, I guess, like forest ranger kind of people in the street being like, oh, you need a permit, you need a reservation. We're like, oh shoot, okay. And in that moment, I remember so clearly, we kind of look at each other and are like, well, we could get pissed and could get sad because we've spent all this time, or like we could be redirected and be so excited about this redirection. And we were redirected to this other trail, and it was just the most magical day. We spent walking upriver for like 8 hours, and just like so expansive and connecting, and this beautiful day that we never could have planned. And so I think that also is something like a foundation of this conversation, and what we've touched on a few times, is that there are 1,000 permutations, million, infinite permutations of our highest timeline, and our ability to try and stuff that into a box that our like minds can create, that our minds can conceive of.
Or like a pros and cons list.
It's like we're only
the universe doesn't speak in pros and cons.
We're only creating an upper limit for ourselves versus just like, I believe that I'm being led to the highest iteration of self and highest iteration of my reality, and playing with that.
1000% agreed. I also, it's really like amazing the way that the universe communicates, because it's not going to be in, plain English or whatever language you speak. The universe is going to communicate in these little micro redirections, or in simply letting you be for a little bit. I mean, I'm not one to dwell on regret. I'm not a big regret person. But the only things in life that I do regret is the times that it was so obvious, to the point where I felt like a personal victim of the universe, because it was so obvious that I was off my highest timeline, in the form of these radical things happening, that had I known, had I had these practices, and had I been having these conversations then, I would have realized were signs of, there's something better out there for you. There's something better out there for you.
Yeah, there's a line that I feel like floats around often. I'm sure a lot of us has heard it, but it's like, rejection is redirection.
Yes, exactly.
And I remember, like, I think a girlfriend said it to me when I was going through a breakup or something, or like had quite literally been rejected. And I was like, in that moment, it's difficult to really hold space for that. You're like, okay, shut up.
I don't want to hear it.
But it truly... it's true. It's true. And the more that we're open to that, then like the more, or the less resistance we'll meet, the more we'll alleviate that suffering and alleviate that paradigm that we're existing in of like, things aren't working. Things don't work for me. Of course that would happen to me. Like all of those beliefs and kind of ways that we speak about the universe, like we can see that and choose to alter that,
Yeah, exactly. And it's, I feel like as far as like actionables go, it is your intuition that's going to be the ultimate guiding compass, right? And what are the practices, you know, SoulPod, obviously. What are the practices that someone can use to tune into their intuition, to gain that clarity, to trust themselves, you know, when they are not on their highest timeline, but when they know that there's a gap between where they are and where they want to be? How do they close that gap?
Yeah, I mean, it's about creating that clarity and creating that like stillness. So I feel like for me, meditation is just the foundation, you know, and whether it be soul pod or whether it be
Agreed.
your own practice or any other way that you're creating space to sit in stillness, it's like, it's, it's just unavoidable. Like you have to create time to be still. You have to create time to listen. You have to create
Yeah.
time to observe the noise and like see it, hold space for it, and let it dissolve. Otherwise, and if you don't have a practice of doing that, then the noise just remains. Like it's always in the
Yeah.
background. There has to be a consistent clearing out. Otherwise, our intuition's just muddled. It's muddled by everything else that's going on externally, everything
Yeah.
else we're being told. So yeah, for me, it's just, I feel like I'm so much more passionate, which didn't even think was possible, about like meditation and these practices, especially recently since I've like doubled down on my practices and see that clear difference in
Yeah.
my ability to remain centered and to, if I fall off center, because I do, I'm human, we all
Of
do.
course.
When I fall off center, my ability to rebound, my ability to come back and trust that I'm being guided, trust
Yeah.
that there's no, I can't miss what's meant for me, that there's no such thing as a wrong decision, that my free will is leading me to my fate, you know, like
Totally.
trusting that and like believing that on a cellular level and believing that that I have the potential to guide myself, but it's also that I'm interconnected enough that I'm guided by my guides, my all of the other timelines that are at play. Like it's all woven together and working together to get me there, to get you there, to get all of us to where we're meant to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is ironic, isn't it, how that noise that you're talking about, that meditation, the reason a lot of us turn to meditation is because of that like voice in our head, that like constant chatter, right? And it is ironic that we're in the pursuit of this highest timeline, and that voice, all it is a survival mechanism. It's just your very human brain trying to keep you safe. And for your very human brain, safe is sameness. But for your experience as a spiritual being, you know, moving into the unknown is kind of a requirement in order to get to that highest timeline, that place of surrender and of trust. It's not about thinking your way and wishing your way and willing your way into it, right? It's about relaxing into the flow that is inevitable and that's meant for you, and getting into that river and just being swept away into it, not into that voice that's in your head that's chattering away trying to keep you safe.
Totally. And I think also like being in conversations like this with like-minded people who are also on their healing journey and devoted to their own clarity and their
Yeah.
own practice, you know, like, and using each other as examples of what's possible, you know, and
Yeah.
like allowing each other's timelines and each other's obstacles and each other's, you know, healing essentially to fortify your own trust in like each person's unique highest timeline coming to fruition. And I
Yeah.
think that's, I don't know, the reason that's coming through is I think there's a lot of like comparison that goes on of like, well,
Oof.
someone else
That's
got
such a good point.
there is like living their highest timeline, but it's because they're XYZ, they're blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
I'm not.
They're more special than
Versus,
me or whatever.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or they're whatever it is, like that one thing that our ego tells us makes us different,
Yeah.
makes us unworthy, makes us unable to create what they have. And instead, like when we see that comparison coming through, you know, noticing it, kind of like you're saying, like seeing that it's the ego trying to keep you safe, trying to keep you in the known, trying to, maintain your status quo, seeing that and like lovingly reorienting around it is like, what if this is actually an example of how the universe is conspiring for their greatest timeline the same way it's doing it for me, the same way their fate is working to meet them, it's working to collide with me. Like I'm being guided to the same extent, and so kind of quelling that comparison and using other people's success and wins as fuel to create a new paradigm that supports the belief that, your timeline is conspiring to meet you as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the biggest brain hack of all, is recognizing that when you see someone have something that you want, it's now like, what is it that the 5-minute mile or something like that, they didn't believe that a mile could be run. Yeah, 4-minute mile. And then as soon as, exactly. So just in case anyone doesn't know that it's, there was, for a long time, the scientific community believed it wasn't possible to run a mile in under 4 minutes. And it wasn't until one person did it that suddenly, immediately after, within the same month, I want to say, or something, a bunch of other people also broke their record. So it's, it's seeing to believe that what you want is possible. And I think about, as far as learning to, and I'm especially talking to my earth signs, I love y'all, but I know you love sameness. And, not so much you, but I know there's some Tauruses tuning in out there that need to hear this, which is that fire dies when it's suffocated. Water dries up if it's stagnant for too long. Wind obviously stops moving when there's no motion. You are elemental, and you are meant to be in this place of motion for a reason, because you are on this very elemental planet, and I think that. it's as safe and as secure as that sameness feels. I promise you, if you can tune into those little glimmers, like we talked about before, those little moments where something that feels too good to be true might be in tune with you, and recognize that there are so many different timelines, there are so many possibilities. If you're having this desire at all, it's because it's meant for you, or it's possible for you, this or better,
Yeah. And something else is coming through as you're saying that is like a super small practical practice.
Oh yeah, let's hear it. Practical practice.
Is like, even on your drive home, because I'm thinking as you're saying sameness, like this, we're in our routines, we're in the same grooves of our brain. And like, for example, even on our drive home, if we take the same exact route, like play with taking a left instead of a right and getting home, where there's on the trail, I walk the same trail every day. And there's like I just discovered.
You're like, now I'm noticing my sameness.
Yeah, totally. My earth sign is like, damn it. Yeah. But there's this offshoot that I recently discovered that takes you on just like a different route around the river. It takes you down closer to the river, whatever. And I've been walking this trail, like I've walked it probably 370 times, and I didn't know, well, no, I always saw this offshoot, but I just like never took it, probably because of that sameness thing. And then recently I've just been playing with this, like playing with that intuition in real time, or like urge in real time, right? Like, okay, I see this offshoot. Let me explore what's down here. What does this look like? And have been playing with, extrapolating that out into other facets of my life. Like, what if I explore this little thing that's inconsequential, this little difference, turn left instead of right, I'll still get home, go down this offshoot, I'll still make it to the end of the river, exploring like with inconsequential points of intersection, something different. And especially when you just have that urge, like turn left instead of right, just listen. Yeah. And I think those are little windows where you can start to play with different timelines, because again, a timeline is like a domino effect from every micro moment. Like me going left and that trail versus right, like totally different timelines. Who I pass on that trail, the time that I get back to the car, like then when I start driving it, like they're all these micro differences in timelines that lead to a different place. And so just playing with those, like again, inconsequential moments of intersection that you can explore something different.
I love that. I think that's such a great way to like from the ground up build like a yeah, like you said, like trust in the different
Mm.
timelines. I have a city version of that where I'll go for a walk, and if I don't have a particular destination in mind, I'll just say I'm just gonna follow the lights. So like if I'm walking and I'm about to cross an intersection and the light turns red but the opportunity to turn right is there, I take it. So I just I follow whatever path
Cool.
is being built out in order to stay in a state of flow, even if it's not the original path that I like originally, envisioned for myself. And obviously there's no destination involved. It's just like whenever the lights change, I go with the lights.
Yeah, and it's so
Yeah.
fun to think about the potential that exists there, right? Because like as you're saying, it's
Yes.
this micro timeline that's a domino effect, and then you find yourself taking, following that flow and then popping into a place for coffee, and then you meet somebody who blah 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 blah
Yeah.
blah, and then it's like there's no there's no way that we can possibly know the how or the when or any of those, but we can just trust that it's going to happen, that if we follow our free will with our intuition, it's leading us somewhere
Yeah.
very divinely choreographed.
Divinely choreographed. I love that way of putting it. Well, thank you so much, Kat. This was such a juicy conversation. And just as a take home for everyone, what we want to do with SoulPod, with everything that we're doing here, just get you comfortable with the idea of being in that state of surrender and that state of flow, and setting you up for not only emotional resilience but also just recognizing what a divine being you are and how you're so much bigger than simply the human existence that we're living in.
Totally. And whether it be this podcast or SoulPod or whatever the tool is that helps to raise your consciousness and create that clarity within the channel
Yeah.
so that you're, more open to that truth, to that light, to that more of that of your soul coming through into this human body and guiding you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Kat. We'll see you
Yeah.
next week,
Thank you,
everybody.
Linda.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for journeying with us today, Light Being. We hope you enjoyed the episode. And before you go, we want to invite you to explore the SoulPod app, where you can immerse yourself in daily lessons, guided meditations, and breath work to develop a soul nourishing daily ritual and tune back into your own inner guidance system. You can download SoulPod in the App Store or directly from the show notes to start your free trial today and awaken the ancient wisdom within you.